I went to Hyde Park to see, because in the National Archives they have all
Is that microphone?
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, can we please have your attention?
Well, we're here for a birthday party. Yeah, and we've got birthday cake and we have champagne, and I think we're going to sing too. So, your job is to get a glass of champagne so we can toast our city. So, it's all up here, and it's kind of champagne. So, shall we pass them back so as many people as possible can get a glass for the toast? I don't know what kind of cake it is, though. We're being very good, and we haven't cut the cake yet. And while we're waiting to toast, let me give you some factoids about our lovely city. 90 years ago, we had 1,900 people living in Laguna Beach. And the residents, I don't know if they call themselves Lagunatics, but we have been for a long time, pushed for incorporation because they were concerned about the anticipated influx of visitors. Yeah. And the first council members were John Brickell, Frank Champion, George Thompson, Joseph Jarris, and Mayor Thomas Cummings. The first chief of police was Abe Johnson, and his first orders were to reduce automobile speed, nothing's changed, in town by imposing a 15 mile per hour and address the issue of double parking. Okay. And the pageant held its first performance in Laguna Canyon, close to the current Boys and Girls Club. The location was called Fairywood because they believed that the fairies sang in the trees. And as a point of historical reference, Calvin Coolidge was the first president of the United States in 1920, was the president in 1927, and the first transatlantic phone call was made from New York to London. This is when we first were here. And a pound of coffee was 45 cents. Eggs were 59. That seems kind of high. Yeah. And you could go to Cornell, including living expenses, for $1,400. A Harley was $235. And we need to figure out what the average net income was, because I don't think it was $5,300 a year. I think that's more like 1950, not 1926. But do you have your champagne? Yes. Okay. So we have some actual early settlers here, and not just Kelly, but we have Thurston here in the room. Yeah. So here's to our beautiful city. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Okay.
If I could just add one thing. Today is also, for those of you that know her, Ilsa Lenschow, our longest serving design review board member, and it's her birthday today. Yeah.
Now, who leads the singing? I think that's. Oh. Where'd she go?
Right there.
See? She jumped. She jumped good.
Okay, everybody, let's go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Laguna Beach. Happy birthday to you.
I know you're going to come up for some cake, but I think there's some people that have some fun little stories that they might want to share. So if anyone would like to tell a story about early Laguna, shall we? I see someone over here.
My name is Hillary Thurston Cole, and I'm the great, great, great granddaughter of the first American settlers in Laguna Beach, George and Sarah Thurston, and I'm Kelly Boyd's cousin. And my mother grew up here, and my grandparents grew up here. I have a picture of my brother with 5 generations all living within 1 block of each other. And that's my brother. We're not talking like major generations before that. And they all lived within 1 block of each other down the bottom of Bluebird at the time. And my grandfather was a teacher at the high school when the high school opened, and he met my grandmother, who was a secretary there. So Laguna's very dear to me, and I've got lots of silly stories, but you know, when my mom grew up here, there was only like 2,500 people. And so this town is enormous as far as she's concerned.
Does someone else have a good little hometown story about families? And, you know, I think Eric Jessen always has something. Can you tell us about that photograph of the president?
Yeah, if you watch closely when Roosevelt's cavalcading through town, the car comes to a stop. The camera's in the tower of the Hotel Laguna, and the gentleman, this is going to be perfect. It's going to happen. The guy with the black hat on the left is Frank Kuprian, whose studio was the Viking studio at Bluebird, and see him handing a painting, right, a framed painting to the president. And we checked the National Archives. I did through the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and we couldn't find any record of a Laguna plein air painting in the National Archives. So we went to Hyde Park, where the president, the FDR library is, and they didn't know anything about it, and they didn't care anything about it.
They wish they had it. They wish they had it.
Okay. My grandfather was Nick Ish, and he came to Laguna in 1895 and opened the general store and post office. And he was in that post office and store for 25 years. And it's because of him that we don't live in Laguna, but that we live in Laguna Beach, because he got the name changed. My mother was born here in 1904, and I was born here in Maha. Mm-hmm.
I know there's some more stories. Where?
Mine's not as early, but I dug water wells in the canyon. So there was no water above the Big Bend. And when I moved out here, I saw a goat that was purple, and it was Rose Eckberg. She started the Pacific Marine Mammal Center. And I moved in, and there was no water, so I had to dig water wells. And we had a Swiss cheese lot, couldn't get water. And then my neighbor came down with divining rods, and he said, dig here, and we got water. So that was really fun. And we found out that we had the well that served the entire Sun Valley Drive area, but nobody wanted to tell us. And one night we saw them on the back north corner cutting lines. They just didn't want us to know, so Chinatown truly is here too.
I don't know how many people care about Richard Nixon, but he had his press room in Laguna Beach, and it was at the Surf and Sand Hotel, and it still says press room over the door.
Yes.
Well, hi, I'm Carol Lloyd, and my mother, Brovie Beck, who has passed away now, did a tremendous amount of early history on our family. And Barbara Diamond knows my mother, and so many of you have met her. But 6 generations back, Henry Rogers was the 5th homesteader in Laguna. And he had the homestead from Temple Hills over to Bluebird Canyon, and that was 160 acres, signed by Rutherford B. Hayes in 1875, I believe. So it was an amazing story, and I have a tremendous amount of stories about that time, thanks to my mother. And then she researched the homesteads of Laguna Beach, 39 of them, and primary research up in Sacramento, she and my father, and she laid it out on the homestead map of Laguna Beach. And primarily it was to find our family's history, which is the Rogers, and his son George Rogers, who planted the pepper tree. And that pepper tree is 138 years old. And he lived at the ranch house, and his daughter, Lizzie, who was 6 years old, and he planted that pepper tree. So lots of stories, and I just love that early stage. It's just incredible. So.
I know we have more stories in here. Don't you, Beaky? Up here? Oh.
Well, my cousin already spoke over here. So, anyway, my grandparents and their family came here in 1871 and settled where Ben Brown's is now, Aliso Creek, and then moved into town later on during the Depression in the 20s, and ended up picking up Mystic Hills and part of Temple Hills and some other property in town. Met my grandmother. They got married, and then she was a school teacher, one of the first, and they named the junior high school, which we call it junior high school. It's now called intermediate, Maurice Thurston Junior High School at that time. And our family's been here, and still my brother and myself are still here in town.
While we're celebrating, I would like to just say a word or two about the young men and women who have served in our armed forces from Laguna Beach. For all of you who are here today from the police department and the fire department, when I first moved here, I lived in a home that was built in the 1920s on Myrtle. And the gentleman there was very, very patriotic. He was very young, and he had a young wife. And they had a baby daughter. And he got sent to World War II. He didn't make it home. And the daughter grew up and went to Laguna Beach High School, and eventually she fell in love and wanted to get married and didn't want to leave her mom alone. So her mom bought a Sears kit house, and they built it in the backyard. Now, how they got that past design review board, I have no idea. Beats me. I should talk to you later. But I lived in that little house that daughter had lived in. And there was a lot of love on that property, a lot of love. And so I want to just say for a moment, while we're celebrating 90 years together as a city, that this city has given a lot of young men and a lot of women to our armed services, to our safety and our care of this country. And I'm very, very grateful to that, because every day in here in Laguna, we're the beneficiaries of all of that. So thank you.
Well, someone knocked on my door a couple of years ago. This young woman, and she said, "Hi, my grandmother was murdered. My great-grandmother was murdered in the house across the street. Do you know anything about it?" Well, the murder took place in the 30s. And this young woman, I think, was really with the CIA, because she left Washington, D.C., and she's been researching this thing. Well, they thought it was a murder-suicide, but she did all of this research, and it turns out that it was a love triangle. The husband found out that his wife, who was a very famous Broadway star and silent movie star, was having an affair with a woman in the house across the street. So, you know this story, maybe. Oh. 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 Whoa. So, yeah. So, This young lady's very charming. She can knock on anyone's door. So she knocked on the house across the street and said, "My great grandmother was murdered here." And she had photographs from the newspaper, and they had staged the suicide. The husband had staged the suicide, but he had the gun in the wrong side because the bullet went in over here, and the gun was over here by her body. So that was the first clue. And they also, she discovered in the fireplace where the bullet went in. And the people who lived there had never seen that was part of the house that they've been living in forever. So you and I need to talk. Any more murder mysteries here? Any story? No, tell us a little more.
Well, actually, the information that I have contradicts what Tony has explained. It does. Yeah, I know. The lady was a very famous theatrical person, and she lived with the other woman who was in the community. She was married. The woman who, the theatrical lady, was married to an actor, and she killed the woman. She killed her lover. She killed the lover. She killed the woman and then left the home, right, Jane? She left the home and drove around the community in whatever she was doing in her head. Their dog had gotten loose, and one of the neighbors found the dog and brought the dog back to the home, which is how they found that the woman had been murdered. But the lady that killed her friend had rearranged her body, combed her hair, done different things to make her presentable after death. Yeah, very thoughtful.
Well, we have a council meeting that starts at 6, and the cake is up here. So, John, you want to?
Sure. Well, I'd like to ask the city council members to come up with the mayor and cut the cake. And while they're coming up here, working their way to the front, I want to thank all the citizens and the employees that came out this evening to help us celebrate our birthday party. And I also want to recognize our community services department staff who pulled all this together. So please, a round of applause. Thank you. And especially Adam Gufari, right here. Okay, so if the media wants to get some pictures, maybe the council wants to go around in the back. It's going to be another decade before we have a big birthday, so.
Laguna Beach 90th birthday party, city council members, Kelly Lloyd.
Okay, there we go. All right, happy 90th Laguna Beach. That's wonderful. We're gonna move the cake out there in the hallway so everybody can take their time having a piece. Please take some. And unfortunately, there is a vegetation fire in the canyon. I don't know how bad it is, but I want to let you know if you're heading that way. That's why the fire department left quickly. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. They're responding right now. But cake out in the hallway. Thank you.
Fire breaks out.
Happy, yeah, I did. I don't feel this is going to be like, those poor guys. Little guys. Cheers, Riley. I don't know.